So hello and welcome to the Dwell Law Podcast. I'm Diane Ulman. I'm the principal lawyer and founder of Dwell Law. We're located in Ontario and our main focus is residential real estate. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Caitlin Lee. She's been working with First Canadian Title for a number of years, and title insurance is such an important part when you're purchasing a home, and we'll go into some of the details. Caitlin has over 20 years of experience in the industry. Not only do I work with her professionally, but I definitely consider her my friend as well. So welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So Caitlin, tell me, how the heck did you get into the industry?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a little bit more of a niche thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I started my career actually at TD Bank, so back when I was 18 years old, and ever since then have been interested in kind of the mortgage side and home ownership and all of that good stuff. So really how I ended up at FCT was a bit of a stroke of luck. It was one of those scenarios where I was really just looking for a new opportunity, found the job posting online and thought, you know what, why not? So thankfully, some 13 years later now, it worked out and I am still here and still very happy.
Right. So today we're going to be talking about title insurance. What an exciting topic, insurance. But truly, it's something that is often kind of overlooked or taken for granted. A lot of homeowners don't really understand what is title insurance. It's yet another line item at a closing meeting that I'm discussing. So can you tell us exactly what title insurance is?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to be totally honest, you're spot on. When I started with First Canadian Title, I had a number of friends reach out asking for car insurance quotes and home insurance quotes. And so, yes, title insurance is not any of those. It is very unique. So really what it does for you, for the homeowner, is protect you from any financial losses that might occur when your title is being challenged. So that could be a title defect or, worst case scenario, fraud. Yeah. And so title insurance is very different from other types of insurance because not only does it protect you for things that might occur in the future, it's really meant to protect for those unforeseen or those unknown issues that happened in the past.
Right.
Of course, when you're meeting with a client, they're purchasing a home, that property could have changed ownership multiple times before your client comes to see you. So they're not going to know what previous owners did to that property. Right. And that, again, is where title insurance comes in. If it's one of the covered title risks, then there's potential coverage for those unforeseen issues.
Right.
And then really the cherry on top with it, and I would argue probably one of the most important things, is if there is a challenge to your title, that can be very, very expensive to either clean up or defend that ownership. And so the FCT title insurance policy includes what we call a duty to defend, which would pay all of those legal costs associated with defending that title and cleaning it up.
Can you give us an example of what could happen to a title before a homeowner owns a property that would absolutely have been missed during the closing time period where the real estate lawyer, there would just be no way for the lawyers involved to have discovered it?
Definitely. So yes, certainly don't expect the real estate lawyer or the homeowner to have a crystal ball. Again, that's what title insurance is for. A good example would be even something as simple as a previous owner perhaps finishing their basement. So maybe, putting in a bathroom, a kitchen, whatever that might look like. Well, you do need permits to do that. And if that previous owner, for whatever reason, decided that they weren't going to go through the proper process of attaining the correct permits, then that would be a good example of something that you're never going to know that. Right. So in the future, when your new owners are in that property, if the city comes along or the municipality comes along and says, hey, this was done without permits, this is now your problem, that again would be a huge expense to your clients if they didn't have title insurance.
Sure. Right on. And then when that hits kind of our office, like I absolutely view title insurance as a complement to a lawyer's work. It does not replace a real estate lawyer's job. I feel like that's a bit of a misconception also. But it is in that situation where it would be very difficult for my office, for us to do the searches, and you're trying to disprove something. So you're looking to see if there should have been permits of a property that maybe got renovated, 3 owners ago. So it's really difficult to figure out exactly when that permit should have been issued, because the current seller, they don't know if it was the seller just before them that did the reno or 2 before them. So yeah, really difficult to track things down like that. So for sure, title insurance is a key part. I think the next question is like title insurance, broad scope there. Title insurance is made up of 2 sections. There's the homeowner policy and then the lender policy. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Definitely. Yeah. So when you are purchasing a home in Ontario, yes, your real estate lawyer is actually absolutely going to set you up with an FCT title insurance policy. And so that protects you, the homeowner, for a number of covered risks, but it also protects the lender. So whichever financial institution you might be doing your mortgage through, you've got your lender policy and your homeowner policy. So you just think of it as, yes, that wholly encompassing policy for everybody that's involved in that transaction, which is, again, why it's so vitally important.
Right.
You as the homeowner do not want to be caught up in having to deal or fighting with, anything that might arise from either side.
Right. So Caitlin, talk to me about the types of things that are excluded from title insurance coverage.
Yes, I would say probably the biggest misconception, or the one that we get asked about pretty frequently, would be fences, for example. So a lot of the claims that we see may have to do with disputes over, say, a neighbor has built a shed on their property and it is now encroaching 4 feet onto your property. So that would be something that, yes, title insurance could potentially get involved, and that there would be coverage for that. Why fences aren't covered? It's same basic principle, that it may be 3 feet onto your property, or it may be 3 feet onto your neighbor's property. It's never quite right. And the reason for that is most, if not every homeowner, is not going to go and get a survey to determine where those fence lines lay. And that's because it's usually just a kind of industry standard, agreed upon fact that none of them are right. And most are willing to kind of accept that little minor variance there. So that's not to say, of course, on the bigger items, yes, you don't want 3 feet of your property being eaten up by your neighbor's shed. Maybe you're okay with that, but if you're not, that would be where title insurance would come into play.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think one of the other exclusions that I talk to my clients about is, as part of the purchasing process, if there's a particular issue that is disclosed to my purchasing client, disclosed right at the outset that there's something off, there's a non-conforming basement renovation, some kind of retrofit, and it's disclosed that there was not it was not legalized, whatever. Title insurance is definitely not going to cover anything like that, because that was known at the time of purchase.
Exactly. Yes, where we like to think we're pretty nice folks, but no, if it's fully disclosed, if it's in the agreement of purchase and sale, that's something that the homeowner is agreeing to. So they're essentially saying, yes, we know that this exists and we're comfortable taking on the risk. So you can't acknowledge something and then turn around and make a claim for it.
Right. So we've been discussing so much about homeowners and when you're first buying your property. But for all of the folks in Ontario that have been in their homes for 20, 30, 40, 60 years, they own their homes free and clear. There's no mortgage. There's none of that. Title insurance was not commonplace when they first bought their home. Talk to those homeowners. What would title insurance, how does title insurance protect them if they were to want to obtain it now?
Definitely. So still equally as important. When I started with FCT, my parents, so speaking personally on this one, they purchased their home in Burlington in the 70s. And so that was certainly well before title insurance existed in Canada. That was one of the first things I did, was make them take what we call an existing homeowner policy, because it still affords them many of the same coverages that are really important. So yes, especially when it comes to seniors who may own their home free and clear, believe it or not, they are the prime targets for fraud.
Right.
Fraudsters want to register a fraudulent mortgage and abscond with the funds. And that's a whole lot easier to do, of course, when you've got a lot of equity in a home. So how a client could go about doing that, they absolutely could contact their real estate lawyer. So they would reach out to Diane at Dwell Law to get that in place, or they can also contact FCT directly. So we're happy to work with them. And similarly to when they're purchasing the home, either now in present day, or if they had purchased it in the past, what's great about title insurance is it's a one-time fee.
Right.
So again, unlike that home insurance where you're paying that on a monthly basis, title insurance, you're one shot and you are protected for as long as you or your heirs own the home. So when you consider the coverage that you get for just a one-time fee, it's huge and so vitally important to protect yourselves.
Right. And then kind of talking about fees, let's use an example. Somebody's buying a home for $1 million. They are getting a mortgage. What kind of fees can people expect?
Yeah, so how it works for the title insurance side is the fee is completely dependent upon the value of the home. So just generally speaking, if it's around $1 million, you're probably looking at $1,000 in terms of title insurance. Again, that's going to depend on the policy and all the good stuff.
But just
that
ballpark,
is very important and why we work with real estate lawyers like yourselves.
Yeah, I just basically wanted anybody watching this video to know that the cost of this policy, $1,000, $1,200, $1,400, and that's protecting you and whoever the mortgage holder is, so the bank involved, and that's the combined amount. It's so important to know that you're buying this $1 million home and that this policy that is quite unique for insurance, where it does protect you against things that could have happened in the past before you became the owner, and that it also protects you against things that could happen in the future, like title fraud and mortgage fraud.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Exactly.
So let's switch into the exciting topic of fraud. So now,
hot topic.
Right. So this applies to those longtime homeowners that may own their homes free and clear. It also applies to folks that just bought their home and they're going to, plan on living there for the next little while.
Yes.
Talk to us about fraud, how rampant it is, and can you give us some juicy examples?
Certainly. So yes, I will say definitely as far as title insurance goes, the fraud aspect of it, I find the most interesting. So, they are very sophisticated. This is not just, somebody waking up one day deciding they're going to try and pull off a fraud. Yeah. These are sophisticated crime syndicates that are doing this. So some of the things that we see are pretty surprising, to say the least. And so really when we look at fraud from the title insurance perspective, it falls into three main categories. So of course you've got your title fraud. So this would be where maybe you have an individual that I pretend to be Diane Ulman, and you come home from work one day and your key doesn't work because I've sold your home out from under you. So that would be one example.
We've seen some headlines about that exact issue in the past year or so.
You don't have to go far. You Google title fraud Ontario and there will unfortunately be a laundry list of examples there, because again, I think it relates back to what we were talking about in the beginning of why it is so important that you partner with a experienced real estate lawyer like yourself. You partner with the biggest title insurer in Canada, FCT, because these are the things that we keep a very close pulse on. We obviously work together as well as with all of the stakeholders in a real estate transaction, like the realtors, like the brokers. because it is that cat and mouse game. As soon
Right.
as we kind of put a process in, they're going to try and shift gears. So we want to stay ahead, and we do that by partnering together.
Right.
And so I think, yes, speaking to the headlines, another one that I think most people would probably be familiar with is the mortgage fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I will pretend to be you and put a fraudulent mortgage on your property and run away with the funds. So, you get a letter in the mail one day saying your mortgage is in default, and you're obviously confused because maybe you didn't have a mortgage until I put a fraudulent one on there. So that again is a fairly large one. And then, one that we don't see as much, but is still absolutely a very real thing in our world is value fraud. So fraudulently inflating the value of a home, again, to try and take that equity out and run away. So
I see.
Yeah, it keeps us on our toes.
Right on. So then if we step back to your second example, where somebody pretends to be the homeowner, puts on a mortgage, pulls the money and takes off. This is a key area for those homeowners that have been in their home and they own their home free and clear. Can you elaborate on that? Like how does that fraudster do it?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a number of ways. Again, when we look at the process kind of in your office, so maybe I'll throw it back to you just momentarily.
Yeah.
So, I'm a client, I am purchasing a home, and I come to you to act as my lawyer on that transaction. What sort of things, right out of the gates are you going to need from me in order to do that?
Right. So homeowner comes to me saying, hey, I want to get a new mortgage. Okay, no problem. We're doing a refinance. Some of the key things that are important to us is timeline, urgency. If all of a sudden they need to close this in like a week, a handful of days, why? So that's a yellow flag. None of what I'm about to say is a red flag, but these are all yellow flags. And eventually they add up to one big stop sign, like do not proceed. So that's one angle, the urgency. Number two is we're doing extensive ID verification now. There has been a big shift in the legal industry, where the Law Society does have a lot more requirements for ID verification, especially if we're meeting our clients on Zoom, which our office does. We're very flexible on how we can meet with our clients. So that's important. And then also we are asking questions. Why are you getting the mortgage? Like, what's the purpose of the funds? We're not trying to be nosy. We're just, we as real estate lawyers, we have legitimately seen thousands, tens of thousands of deals that have closed successfully. So there's a lot in regard to pattern recognition. So if all of a sudden the story doesn't, quite make sense, what's going on? Yes. Yeah. And we have more and more follow-up questions. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I think, again, that's something that is so important about how we work together. So yes, in terms of if something's not passing that sniff test, if there's just that spidey senses tingling from your end, of course, you're that first line of defense. You're the one meeting with the client, either in person or virtually. So as a title insurer, we are relying on you, the lawyer, the legal professional, quite heavily to assist us with that. And a big part of that is that ID verification. So you ask, how does this happen? Well, you can go and get a fraudulent driver's license for $35 off the internet. It's quite frightening how easy it is to do. And so that is why it's so important, again, to work with those firms that have those checks and balances in place. Because when it comes to us and we're reviewing that deal as part of our process, we can rely on that information that you've provided to us and then make that decision together. So it's quite, yes, an ever-evolving area of the title insurance is the mortgage fraud, especially because you figure if you own, I'll take a home in Burlington as an example, if you own $1 million home and you've spent your whole life working to pay off that mortgage, you've done it, it's free and clear, happy days. the worst thing you could get tied up in is, yes, having an example of a real fraud claim that we saw. It was a father and son, adult son, and the father and adult son had the same first, middle, and last name. And unfortunately, it was missed that the son had put on a fraudulent mortgage against the father's property. No one caught that the age was a little off there.
Like 30, 40.
Right,
yeah, 30
exactly. He
years.
looked really great for his age. So, but we're human. It
Right.
happens, right? So unfortunately, that was a very unique scenario because his ID wasn't fraudulent. It just, he was impersonating someone.
Right.
So again, that's where FCT was able to step in and say, not to worry, to the dad, the rightful owner. We paid all of the legal costs associated with getting those mortgages off title, discharged, and cleaning it up for him.
Right.
So
Because in the policy, there's that, what did you call it? Obligation to defend?
duty to defend.
Duty to
Yes,
defend.
exactly.
So thank goodness that dad in that situation who owned that home free and clear
Yes.
did have title insurance, because he was able to challenge that fraudulent mortgage.
Exactly.
Yeah. What a sad story. So
Truly.
as it is, sometimes the fraudsters can be a family member.
Yes.
It's not necessarily crime syndicates that we see in the news.
It's
It can be
true.
very close to home.
It's actually a sad statistic that you are most likely to be defrauded by a family member or someone that you know, because they know everything about you. So that's a bit unfortunate, but again, why it's so important to have title insurance.
So another angle that I have discussions with my clients, especially those who are buying in cash, so they're not getting a mortgage on title. They're just in a fortunate position. They don't need to get a mortgage. I do have those conversations about, hey, you might consider just registering a line of credit. Don't use the funds, just have something registered on title so it's not free and clear. From my perspective, this is just a deterrent to fraudsters. It is not foolproof, because I know you have examples that I'm going to ask you to share. But basically the premise is you own your home essentially free and clear, but you've got this one, it's categorized as a mortgage on the title, but it's a line of credit. So balance is zero. But if a fraudster comes along and they apply for a fraudulent mortgage, now they're going to be in second position, this fraudulent mortgage, second position. Generally speaking, that second position mortgage is going to trigger some kind of notification to the first position bank. So again, it's just a deterrent, not foolproof, because tell me an example. Like before, I actually thought this was not bulletproof, but quite a deterrent. But fraudsters are now willing to invest money in these situations.
Definitely.
So please elaborate, because it's kind of wild.
It is wild.
Right.
And I think, I remember even from my banking days recommending the same things,
Right.
because it's to your point, that extra step. If I am the fraudulent, bad actor on this transaction, when I discover that there is this line of credit, which again is classified as a mortgage, well, now I've got to, if I want to try and access that equity that's now being tied up by that line of credit, I've got to get that discharged potentially. Right. And so, yes, I think in days of old and looking at trends again, that would deter most. Right. And it kind of wasn't worth the effort to go that route. But now, especially with multi-million-dollar properties, property values have certainly skyrocketed over the last number of years. It is worth it. If you kind of just think of it, even from a personal standpoint, if you had to invest, $50,000 to get a couple $1 million payday, would you maybe try? Would you put in the effort?
Right.
They will. So they will, invest real money into the fraud to pull it off. So
the example being, there's a current mortgage registered on title. It's legitimate. There's, call it $300,000 outstanding on the mortgage, but the property itself is worth like $2 million. So what are the fraudsters doing? Like, what money are they investing?
Yes, so they would pay out that mortgage, probably from proceeds of crime, but they would pay out the existing mortgage in order to then fraudulently register a new mortgage and abscond with the funds.
Right.
Yeah. So they'll invest in there.
Just to summarize, these fraudsters are going, they're applying, they're impersonating the homeowner. Yeah. They're getting through that step. However, whatever means they're doing to do that. Then they're going to a mortgage broker. They're saying, hey, my property is worth $2 million. I'd like $1 million mortgage. From a mortgage agent's perspective, requesting a mortgage at a 50% loan to value, property's worth $2 million, they're asking for a mortgage for $1 million, not super unusual. That's not even a high risk mortgage.
Yes.
So this new bank that's going to loan out the $1 million is like, yeah, this makes sense. Property's worth $2 million. We agree. Sure, let's do it. So what you're saying is this fraudster is now going through the process of refinancing. They're getting this new $1 million mortgage. From that $1 million, they're paying out that legitimate mortgage that's current balance is like $300,000. So these fraudsters are walking away with $700,000 never to be seen again. Right. Yeah, so this is another example of where title insurance comes into play, because once that innocent homeowner finds out about this, because they don't even know they have a new mortgage with a different bank. Exactly. They start getting letters in the mail saying, hey, you haven't been paying your mortgage payments on your new $1 million mortgage.
Yes.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's exactly how it plays out. They aren't even aware that this has happened until, weeks at the bare minimum, until they start defaulting.
Right.
And if the fraudulent new mortgage is set up on a monthly payment schedule, it could be it's significant. Like, they are so gone by the time the innocent party becomes aware of what's happening. So it's why, again, we share these trends when we become aware of them and we speak to them, because the only way we're going to, again, get ahead of this and stop this is by working together. Because they are very creative. I'll give them that. So
I feel like all the folks in your fraud department, like within FCT, burn through antacids, because they just absolutely, I don't know how they sleep at night, but thank goodness for them. Thank goodness for them. Because sometimes they'll just decline a policy because something is off, or they're aware, FCT or any of the title insurers are aware of something that maybe the lawyer is not able to disclose, or not able to discover, and it's just not publicly known. So it's fantastic. So such an important area.
And I think you actually raise a really good point. Title insurers as a whole, we are obviously in the business of issuing policies. When you look at the percentage that we don't, it is very nominal in comparison. Mm-hmm. And I think when we are reviewing that deal and going through our underwriting process, you hit the nail on the head. It is a scenario where maybe we have previously seen that deal, or we are aware of information that at face value, that deal, that policy could look perfect. But that is why we've got that phenomenal group, and our underwriters have an average tenure of a decade. So even if it is something really outside of the box that maybe you haven't seen before in your office, chances are they're doing this on a national scale. So it really does give us a good position to be able to identify those trends and then speak to them and share them with the legal community, because it doesn't do anybody any favors when we experience a fraud. It's nasty for every single party involved.
And I guess just to summarize, it just goes to show like how important each professional in the industry is, like a key player. It really is, no one professional can get the total deal done, whether we're just talking about a refinance or a full-on purchase and sale. So
definitely. No, it not to oversimplify, but it takes a village. So to have each of those parties, again, working in tandem. And it's why it's so important that you you are working with, a realtor, a broker, a real estate agent, the law firm that
Yeah,
are
I was just going to say, and the real estate lawyer.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Most importantly, the real estate lawyer. Because again, that's how we are able to identify those trends by every party working together and sharing that information and staying ahead of it. Because like I said, no one wants their name associated with that. So
right. In a scenario where a homeowner has now discovered a title issue, a fraud has happened, what I'm seeing is those clients generally call me. And I actually think that's a really great first step. Call your real estate lawyer, say, hey, I think there's something going on. What do I do next? I do find a lot of homeowners are really hesitant to call insurance companies because unlike home insurance, some home insurance companies, when you call them just to ask a question about, hey, would this type of damage be covered under my home insurance policy? Some of them deem it as a claim,
yes.
which is crazy.
Yes.
That is not how title insurance works.
No.
So I certainly have homeowners calling me saying, I think there's a problem and, we can discuss it. And in our office, we will actually help the client submit a claim to FCT or to whatever title insurance company they have their policy with. Perfect. As a first step. And can you tell me what happens after either the homeowner contacts FCT directly to submit a claim or if their lawyer assists them in getting that first step going?
That's a great question. So, and I think, again, going back to misconceptions, I know title insurers, or I should say any insurance company, can sometimes get a bad rap for the reason that you just explained. But again, title insurance works very, very differently. What's great about it, if an issue arises, of course, we don't expect the homeowner or even the real estate lawyer to have all the answers. That's not your role in this, that's ours. And so we have a phenomenal team on our claims side of the business. And so whether that homeowner would like to contact us directly or, obviously they've worked with you, you're probably freshest in their minds. So if they approach yourself, then of course, yes, the lawyer can submit that claim on their behalf as well. But what happens is once we receive that, we're going to, look through it with a fine-tooth comb. And what I mean by that is we really do pride ourselves. If there is coverage to be found, if we can, fit it under one of the covered title risks, of course, we're going to do that. We take pride in the fact that we pay our claims, and we want to make that experience as phenomenal for the client and our legal professionals on the back end, just as it is in obtaining that policy on the front end. So it's got to be that holistic, beginning, middle, and end. And once we do that, we will either, if the claim has come directly from the homeowner, we will reach out directly to them. Or, of course, we would work with the legal professional to address that issue as well.
Right.
But the one thing I really, really want to stress is we don't want anyone feeling, I've got maybe this issue. I'm not too sure. I have no idea. This is all, foreign to me. Pick up the phone. That's what, we're here for. Certainly, if you think you're, in a claim type scenario, we're happy to talk to you about that. We are happy to kind of walk you through the process of how you submit it. And I think I don't want anyone to ever be wary of doing that. It's not a black mark against you.
There's no demerit points involved.
Definitely.
To call and ask some questions.
No, there's no deductible. It's a no fault claims process with FCTs. So yes, it won't affect anything. If there's coverage to be found and we can deal with it, amazing. Everyone is happy. If it's a scenario where maybe there isn't coverage, we would fully explain that. And it's not like you can't submit another claim in the future for something else. Right. So yeah, it is very flexible by design, because we obviously want that protection to work the way it's intended.
Great. Well, thank you for that explanation.
Yes.
Caitlin, what are the most common areas that are covered by title insurance?
Definitely. So I would say one of the biggest areas we see from a covered claims perspective would be the lack of building permits. So that one's huge, especially in Ontario. You've got maybe previous owners that did finish that basement and did not go out and get the proper building permits to do so. So again, you would have no way of knowing that until something triggers that coverage under the policy. Maybe now you're renovating your basement again and updating it, and you've gone and you've got the proper building permits, and city comes along and says, oh, well, no. Now you're responsible for remedying or removing whatever was done. So that would probably be one of the biggest. Kind of on the flip side of that too would be outstanding work orders. So this might be a scenario where maybe they did get permits, built a deck addition, a deck covering that's anchored to the home, but never got the final inspection, never got that signed off on, and now your innocent homeowners are in the property, and maybe neighbor complains, and so city comes along and say, hey, this was never finished, you've got to comply now. So
I love that you brought up the deck example, and you said a key thing, a deck that was anchored to the home.
Yes.
Because if it's, from my understanding, is if it's anchored to the home, you need a permit. If it's not anchored and affixed to the home, then it's considered a floating deck and you don't need a building permit. There are just all of these very minute details that unless you're a contractor who knows the building code, a homeowner, a lawyer, we're not on site to see if the deck is, affixed to the property. This is how things can get missed, overlooked, and all of a sudden there's a permitting issue.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a great point. Again, you would know, think how long it would take to close a real estate transaction if we were having to do, all of the searches, all of the things that before title insurance came to Canada, we were having to do. So this allows you, again, to close those transactions quickly and efficiently, but still have the peace of mind that the coverage is there should, in that scenario, city come along and knock on your door. So those, I would say, are quite big areas. Won't go into it again, but fraud and forgery are
of course
large.
Yes.
Somebody forging your signature or fraudulently producing documents is a big one. But another really large one too is tax and utility claims. So it's kind of that chicken and egg type scenario. Some firms choose to order tax certificates, others don't, because it is something that title insurance covers. So instead of incurring the fee at the time to get the tax certificate, they will rely on that title insurance to cover any costs associated with previous owners maybe not being up to date on their tax utility payments.
And to elaborate on that, like how property tax, how we adjust for that at the law offices is, in this situation, I'm representing the purchaser. We receive documents from the seller's lawyer, from the seller and the seller's lawyer. They're signing off saying that their property taxes are paid and up to date, or if they're not, if they're in arrears, that, it happens, that the vendor's lawyer is actually going to use some of the sale proceeds and pay out any outstanding property taxes. So any arrears are dealt with. There are occasions where, for one reason or another, that doesn't happen. And then all of a sudden, my purchasing client gets the next property tax bill from the city, municipality, and it shows that there's arrears that are still outstanding from before they became the owner. And we certainly get those calls, unfortunately, because it's a loose end that should have been resolved. And what do? We reach out to the vendor's lawyer. We say, hey, this was supposed to be paid out on closing. What the heck happened? Please rectify it. I'll correct myself. I don't really care what happened. Just fix it. Fix it, because my purchasing client, it is not their problem, is the point. So we're reaching out to the other lawyer. That lawyer is reaching out to their selling client. most cases, that selling client, it was just an error. It was a kind of innocent error. Somebody overlooked something. It gets paid out, no issues from the vendor side, from the seller side. In the situation where that vendor's lawyer reaches out to their previous client, that seller's long gone. They just don't even want to talk to their old lawyer anymore. They don't have the money, perhaps, to pay out those arrears. The money's gone. Then what? Not on my purchasers. It's not my purchaser's responsibility. What are we doing? We're submitting a claim to title insurance.
You got it.
And then what does your office do?
Yeah, so great question. And I think from just a sheer volume of claims that FCT sees, when you call our claims department, the voice prompt will actually ask you, is it a tax utility claim? Press 1. For absolutely anything else, press 2. And part of the reason for that is, yes, we get many tax claims, and that's fine. So we obviously would take over that process and make sure we're rectifying that for your homeowner. And that's really meant to allow the team that focuses specifically on those tax utility claims to do that and do that quickly and efficiently. That's all they work on. And that frees up, of course, the other claims handlers for maybe the more complex ones, like the deck not being, having the right signed off on building permits. So that's kind of how we manage it internally, just to, again, keep that flowing nice and smoothly on the back end, just as much as on the front end of a deal too.
Okay. Great. And then what about encroachments?
Yep. So that is another big one, definitely. And I think, again, it's usually it's not a nefarious reason why these come about. It could be, a neighbor puts up a shed in their backyard, or maybe even builds an addition. And because they don't necessarily have those surveys, they think they're within their property lines, but they're not. And now, yes, maybe it's encroaching onto your property, or vice versa. A previous owner had built an addition on your house that's encroaching on your neighbor's property. These are things that, again, you're not going to know before you close, and can pop up after the fact. And again, that would be most likely, again, covered under the title insurance policy. So that's...
Do you have an example that's maybe a little, like, I'm saying exaggerated, meaning it's a little more than a shed that's encroaching? Like, what's a file that you can share with us?
For an encroachment, it would probably be more the addition.
Okay.
So kind of falls not so much maybe under the encroachment side of things, but we did have a scenario where the previous owner had completely built a huge addition onto the back end of the home. So, leaving foundation, it was a quite a large addition that was being built. Now, same sort of thing, not the correct permits in place. And essentially what ended up happening, the foundation, it got to a point that it was actually unlivable. So the city came along and said, this is pretty much collapsing in on itself. It's not safe, and yes, issued orders to comply. But it was a nightmare for these poor owners that had no idea.
Okay. Yeah.
So in addition to that being a covered title risk, and FCT, ensuring that they were not suffering any financial loss of all of the repair work that had to be done, we actually put that family up in a hotel because the property was not livable while these repairs were being done. It just wasn't safe. So that's a pretty extreme example. Yes. But again, we title insure more properties in Canada than any other title insurer. So we have seen all sorts of interesting claims scenarios. But again, why it's so important, whether you have owned your home for many years or are just purchasing maybe your first home now, it doesn't matter the timeline, whether, yes, old or new or present day, you've got to get that title insurance policy in place. Could you imagine dealing with that scenario without it? Basically, we rebuilt the house for them.
Financially devastating to the family involved, for sure.
I certainly do not have that in my bank account.
So. Right, exactly. Caitlin, there are so many properties now that are advertised on MLS as a multifamily unit, a nanny suite. You know, it's got a finished basement, a kitchen, you know, a bathroom. Talk to me about how that changes the policy coverage or what your real estate lawyer needs to be doing or needs to know about.
Definitely. That's a great question, because I think there is a lot of confusion around that. You know, whether a family who's moving into a home intends to use it as a multifamily or multi-unit residence or not.
Right.
The fact that perhaps, yes, they've got that finished basement with a separate entrance, a kitchen, a bathroom. It is a fully self-contained, livable unit.
Right.
So it does change the coverage, and it does change the policy that you would want to be ordering for them to ensure they have the proper coverage in place. So when it's a scenario like that, where what we call or deem a multi-unit property. Mm-hmm. So an example, like I just described, maybe a finished basement that has that separate kind of living unit, or it could be actually tiny homes popping up. So you've got your primary structure, your primary home that you live, but maybe you've built a separate unit, little tiny home on the property. We've seen that popping up more recently. Maybe you own a cottage property where your boathouse has a bunkie unit above it. That would be a 2-unit. So it's really not so much about what you're intending to do with it. It's about what exists at the time of purchase. And why it's important from the legal professional standpoint is, as soon as you tell us that it's a multi-unit as part of your title insurance order, it will actually prompt you to complete 3 additional searches. So we'll want that building, zoning, and fire search. Again, we want to ensure we're providing the right coverage for the type of property that that owner is now purchasing. So sometimes I get asked, okay, well, that makes sense. And yes, we want to make sure we've got the right coverage, but how do I really know if it's multi-unit? How can I determine that? Or what questions should I ask my buyer, my purchaser? And so there are a couple tips, tricks that we find are very helpful. So agreement of purchase and sale, we'll start with that. When you're going through, when you're looking at those chattels, if there are 2 fridges, 2 stoves, 2 everything,
2 kitchens,
exactly, that would probably prompt you to say, hey, you know, tell me about that. Why is there a basement unit, or just let me know what's going on with that, and hopefully they can kind of direct you. Another good way to tell is, we find most will be advertised as, you know, granny suite potential or Airbnb potential on the MLS listing. So another great resource.
Income opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All those good things. So you can kind of cheat by using those. And I think at the end of the day, it just prompts that further conversation with that potential buyer to really ensure, okay, is this a single family, a true single family? Then we want to title insure it as such. Is it a multi-unit? Well, then again, we want to make sure we get the appropriate coverage, because we would never want to find, you know, certainly yourself or your client in a scenario where the wrong policy is ordered and that limits their coverage.
Right.
Yeah, we don't.
And I think one of the key distinctions here is it is irrelevant. It does not matter if that basement unit is, quote, legalized or not legalized. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you're wanting, you know, one of your immediate family members to live in the basement, or you're about to bring in a stranger as like a formal tenant. It does not matter. It's that this unit itself has a kitchen, a functional kitchen. It's, I believe you said it's its own separate entrance, which so many properties do, and actually put in alternate entrances. So this is absolutely triggering additional searches that your real estate lawyer needs to do to make sure that the homeowner has proper coverage. And it does not matter that the homeowner themselves intends to use the basement for like a stranger tenant or whatever. You need to have the proper coverage, because what happens if they don't get the proper coverage? What's the downside here?
Yeah, so the downside would be that they would have, so in the example of it is a true multi-unit, so maybe there is that basement suite,
Right.
but the policy was ordered as single-family dwelling at the time of purchase.
Right.
Then that will limit any coverage that has to do with that basement unit. So
Sure.
if, again, city comes along and slaps a work order or whatever the scenario might be, there won't be coverage for it.
Okay.
Because it's unfortunately the wrong policy was ordered.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, that's a pretty key thing for a lot of homeowners that are, and is at the time of purchase. It is not, you buy your single family residence. It maybe has a finished basement, but there's no kitchen. It's just, a carpeted basement, like finished. It's still a single family home.
Yes.
You can then go on and renovate the basement. It's now a second unit. Your original coverage when you bought, still totally valid.
Exactly.
Everything's good to go. No issues there. It's just about when you purchased it at that day one.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Great.
I think you raise a good point. It from a title insurance perspective, as an industry, again, we kind of just accept the risk that whether it's legal or non-conforming, it doesn't matter really for our purposes. We don't ask any questions as part of our underwriting process, whether it is or isn't.
Right.
We're just more concerned with the fact that the unit exists.
Okay.
That's where, the risks come into play for all of the covered title risks that we cover for under the policy. So you nailed it on that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Caitlin.
No problem.
If you're wanting to learn more about title insurance, absolutely take a look at FCT's website at fct.ca. If you want to reach out to Caitlin directly, you can find her on LinkedIn. And from Dwell Law's perspective, if you're wanting to see any of our other videos, absolutely you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the places. And we look forward to chatting with you again.